Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is video lecture 1.5, and our topic today is supply. We talked about demand in the last video. Now, let's introduce you to supply. A lot of the same principles apply here, so let's get into it. Supply is kind of the business side of it. So, when we looked at demand, we're looking at households, individuals, consumers, and how they approach products, goods, and services. Supply is the other side of it. It's the businesses, the firms, they call them, that actually produce the goods and services. So when we define it, it's simply how much of a good businesses are willing to produce at a set price. And if you think about it, when prices go up, firms can be more profitable from producing that good, right? Because they can sell it for a higher price. That's exciting to them, and so they're willing to supply more. When prices are low, firms are like, oh, we're probably not going to be able to make a whole lot of money off that. It might not be worth their time, and so supply might be low. That's the idea of the supply curve. So we call that the law of supply. And it's kind of the opposite of the law of demand, right? When prices rise, the quantity supplied goes up. So you can see here, when price goes from 5 to 15, quantity rises along with it, right? Creating this upward sloping curve. When prices fall, the quantity supplied falls, right? So you can see that as well. Let's say we go from 50 to $45. Well, we go from like 850 to like 750 goods being produced. The question is, why do they have this direct relationship? They have this direct relationship because it's all about profitability for firms. Firms are pursuing profits, individuals are pursuing utility. So when price goes up, firms can be more profitable, and so they're going to supply more. When price goes down, firms are going to be less profitable. They're going to supply less. This is kind of counterintuitive. A lot of people think, well, if the price is lower, shouldn't they sell more of that product? Remember, we're looking at market supply. We're looking at all suppliers, not just one business or one firm, right? And so when the price goes down, some firms that were producing that good are no longer going to produce it. And so they'll get out of the market, which decreases the quantity supplied. So don't think about it as an individual firm, but all firms that are making these choices. Now, as a result of this law of supply, direct relationship, price goes up, quantity supply goes up. Price goes down, quantity supply goes down. Because of that direct relationship, it creates an upward sloping curve. We call it the upward sloping supply curve. Supply up, 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 sup, up, supply. Sup, up, supply. See, it's all in there. Down demand, sup, up, supply. So you will never forget which one's downward sloping, which one's upward sloping. Okay, here's the why. The reason we have this law of supply, I already said it, is that a higher price means higher profit potential, which means we increase production. More firms will enter the market to sell that good, and the firms that are already in that market are going to ramp up production of it, right? That's the idea. And then vice versa. If prices fall for a good, then we're going to decrease, or there's a lower profit potential, so we're going to decrease production. So we're seeing that right now with masks and with hand sanitizer, right? The price of those things keeps on going up. And when the price is higher, more firms are entering the market. And the firms that were already in those markets have ramped up production because of the profit potential there. Okay, so we also have market supply. So we're not just looking at the supply of one firm, like we said, it's the market as a whole. So it's all firms that are producing the goods that are in that marketplace. All firms that produce bananas are going to have a collective supply curve in the banana market. If that makes sense. And it's simply sellers times quantity supplied. So if I have 10 sellers and they each supply 10 bananas, then our market supply will be 100. When price goes up, those same 10 sellers might sell 20 bananas, so my market supply is going to be 200. So whenever you're looking at the supply curve, think of the market as a whole. Demand curve is the market as a whole, all demanders of that good. Supply curve is all suppliers of that good. Okay, hopefully that makes some sense. So how do you graph it? Let's take a look at this. Just like milk, or just like the demand for milk, I should say, the supply for milk and the supply for any good is actually made up of a chart, data points, right? So notice here, when prices are really low at like $2, my quantity supplied is 20. When price goes up to $3, my quantity supply will be 30. When price goes up to $4, my quantity supply will be 40. You should notice the trend. As prices rise, quantity supplied goes up. Why? because of the law of supply, because of profitability, right? When prices rise, firms are going to be more profitable. So get yourself in that mindset. We can plot these points out like so, right? At $1, we have 10 units of milk that are being supplied to the market. At $2, we have 20 units of milk. At $3, we have 30. At $4, we have 40. And at $5, we have 50. Plot those points, connect the dots, and you'll notice an upward sloping supply curve, up, supply, direct relationship because of the law of supply. Supply is going up, demand is going down. As a result, we get this graph. And this is really how you draw it every time. You're going to draw this a lot. You draw an L, you put in a downward sloping demand curve, down demand because of the law of demand. Increase in price results in a decrease in quantity demanded. You put an upward sloping supply curve, up, supply, because the law of supply. When prices go up, the quantity supplied will rise. Direct relationship there. Now, as we go through here, right, we're actually going to find where these two equal. I'll talk about equilibrium here in a second. But before we do that, I want to talk about shifts of supply. Just like shifts of demand, a shift in supply will be any change in the supply of a good outside of price. Because if it's a change in price, we'll just move along the curve. We've talked about that. We've demonstrated that a couple of times. But if there's an outside factor that isn't price, then supply could shift. For example, let's say there's a brand new technology that makes the production of this good much, much easier to do. So what's our good? Let's say, I don't know, let's do movies. Okay, so there's a new technology that makes it very easy to make movies. They're a lot cheaper, whatever. That new technology, the supply is going to go up. Now, oftentimes people want to shift the supply curve up, but in fact, remember, it's right and left. So an increase is right, a decrease is left. So if I shifted supply up, I would actually push it left, which shows a decrease. But when I have a new technology that makes it a whole lot cheaper to produce a good, then I'm going to supply more of it. So we show that as a supply curve shifting to the right. Now, let's say there's something like a global pandemic that impacts the production of movies because people can't be in the same place at the same time. And so the supply is going to shift to the left. Has nothing to do with price. It's an outside factor. The supply is going to shift to the left as a result. And that demonstrates a decrease in supply. Now, of course, just like before, we're going to have a new equilibrium for each of these. And that new equilibrium is going to give you a new price and quantity. So when supply went down, there's going to be less being exchanged, which makes sense. But because there's less supply, the price is actually going to be driven up. We'll show you more of that in a second. And when supply is just right, price goes down because there's a whole lot of it. So it bids down the price. And the quantity being exchanged goes up. Okay, so far so good. Let's keep on moving. Okay, so you put those two together and you get something called equilibrium. Equilibrium is going to be where quantity demanded and quantity supplied are equal, right? The idea is that any other price other than the equilibrium price, move my face a little bit. I'm trying to find the best spot for my face. There we go. Any other price is not going to be agreed upon, right? So let's say we have a really, really high price here, say P1. Well, what's going to happen at P1? Well, I dash over, I hit my first curve. What curve did I just hit? I hit demand. So my quantity demand is going to be very, very high. I'm sorry, very, very low. That's my quantity demanded. It's very, very low. Price is high, quantity demanded is very low, and that makes sense. Law of demand. When prices are high, quantity demand is very low. I keep on dashing until I hit my next curve at this price. So at this price, my quantity supplied is going to be very, very high. Quantity supplied, very high. So if quantity supplied is very high, quantity demanded is very low, then I have a surplus on my hands, and this would be way too much. If I have a surplus, it's going to bid down the price. So prices are going to fall. And vice versa. Let me get a different color marker here. Let's say the price is too low. Call it P2. If the price is too low, I dash over until I hit my first curve. With a low price, businesses are not going to be very profitable, so quantity supplied is going to be very low. Keep on dashing over until I hit demand. Well, with that low price, we're all like, woo, low price. So the demand is actually going to be very high. When demand is high and supply is low, we have a shortage, right? Shortage, sure. I'll just put short for short. When we have a shortage, we know that shortages result in a bid up of the prices. So prices will go up. So any other price is going to create a surplus or a shortage, and it's going to move us until we get to equilibrium. At equilibrium, that is where we will stay. There'll be no incentive to produce more or produce less. This will give us our market price and our market quantity. Look at that. Bunch of chicken scratch, but I'll show you more here in a second. All right, let's keep going. So an equilibrium at rest will remain at rest unless acted upon by a determinant. So equilibrium is the title there. So equilibrium at rest will remain at rest unless acted upon by a determinant, because at quantity demanded equals quantity supplied, there's no surplus, there's no shortage. Remember, price is too high, there's going to be a surplus. Suppliers are going to supply a bunch, demanders aren't going to demand very much, and that extra will create clearance on the item, right? When there's too much produced of something, it goes on clearance and pushes the price down towards equilibrium. When the price is too low, we're going to have a shortage. People are going to demand a lot, but nobody's going to supply it. With that shortage, it's going to bid prices up towards equilibrium. When we have no shortage or no surplus, we're right at the equilibrium. We will stay there forever unless there's a shift in the curve, like we talked about. There's an outside factor that isn't price that shifts the curve left or right, either demand or supply. Right? So, at equilibrium, it determines our price and our quantity. This is going to be the actual price you pay, and this is going to be actual quantity that is bought and sold. And it's very easy to find. You just find where the two sides intersect. That's going to be your equilibrium every single time. Because at this point, it's where the interests of the suppliers and the demanders align. They're both happy with it. Demanders are happy paying that price. Suppliers are happy selling it at that price. And that will give our equilibrium there. Okay, so every time you see one, add at that equilibrium. So price of pizza, if I went to buy a slice of pizza in this marketplace, I would pay $3 for pizza. And how many slices of pizza would actually be sold in this marketplace? It would be 8. And that's determined from the quantity supplied and quantity demanded being equal. Okay, we talked about this a little bit, but remember, when the price is not at equilibrium, it rations our goods. In other words, when the price is very, very high, it's going to create a surplus. It's going to move us towards equilibrium. When the price is too low, it's going to create a shortage, and it's going to push us towards equilibrium. In other words, if I'm producing too little, then the market will tell us, hey, prices need to go up, right? You produce too little, you have a shortage, prices are going to go up, and it'll automatically move us back to equilibrium. If I'm producing too much surplus, price is too high, we need to lower this price. You're producing too much. When we lower this price, quantity supply falls, quantity demand rises until we get back to equilibrium. I'll show you a couple examples of that later on. There you go. So you should write this down. When the price is above, it's going to create a surplus, which moves our price down towards equilibrium. When the price is too low or below equilibrium price, it's going to create a shortage, which again will bid prices up and move us back towards equilibrium, like I showed you earlier. So at equilibrium, we are productively efficient, right? Because we're using all of our resources to produce as much as humanly possible. But we're not inefficient because we're not producing too little, shortage. We're not producing too much, surplus. We're producing exactly what our society needs. We're at full production potential. So we are productively efficient at our equilibrium. Also at our equilibrium, we are allocatively efficient. We're producing exactly what society wants. Remember, allocative is we're producing what society wants, right? So if the demand is greater than supply, we have a shortage, then we need to supply more resources to this in order to produce more, right? So it reallocates our resources. We're producing too little, prices rise back to equilibrium. If quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded, we have a surplus, then we need to supply fewer resources to this. And it'll push our equilibrium price down. At equilibrium, we're producing exactly what our marketplace wants. We have supplied exactly the amount of resources there. We know that because they are demanding that good, right? And we've met all of the market demand as a result. So we are both productively efficient, which means we're producing at capacity on the production possibilities curve, and we're allocatively efficient. We're meeting the demand of the consumers. They said they demanded this many, we supplied that many to the market. Okay, try it out here. Now, this is not a graph, right? This is a chart. But remember, our charts, our graphs, all of our curves are represented by bullet point numbers, right? They're points on a graph. So can you find the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity, I should say? Give you a second. Okay. If you answered that the equilibrium price is $5 and the equilibrium quantity is 7, you are correct. How do we know that? Well, if I were to plot this out at $5, at $5, I have a quantity demanded of 7, right? So put that on my demand curve, on my demand curve. I have a quantity supplied, put my supply curve, I have a quantity supplied of, you guessed it, 7. So at this point, it's the intersection of my supply and my demand curve, which means I must be at equilibrium. Any other point or any other price is going to create a shortage or a surplus. Let's take a look. If the price was at $3, do I have a surplus or a shortage? Well, I'm going to have a shortage. Check it out. My quantity demanded is 9, high. My quantity supplied is 5. I can draw that on the graph too. I put $3 on here. My quantity supplied is going to be very, very low. If I look over here, they said my quantity supplied was 5. If I keep dashing, I hit my second curve. That's going to be my quantity demand, and my quantity demand is going to be very, very high. They said my quantity demanded was 9. What do I have? I have a shortage. What's going to happen is they're going to push the price up. When price goes up, my quantity supplied will go up from 5 to 7. My quantity demanded will go down from 9 to 7, back towards equilibrium. And vice versa. If we had $7, then 9 would be supplied, 5 would be demanded, and we would have a surplus, and that would be represented up here at $7. We'd have this intersection, which would be my quantity demanded, which would be 5. We'd have this intersection here, which would be my quantity supply, which would be 9. And the difference between them would be our surplus, pushing our price down back to equilibrium. Okay, hopefully that makes some sense. It's a little heady. There's a lot of stuff here, but we'll do a ton of practice with it, and you'll be A-okay. All right, that's it. Complete Khan Academy 1.5 supply. Also, it has some equilibrium stuff in there. Do your best. Remember, these are designed to be challenging, and then we'll come back in class and work with it. Have a wonderful day.